There's this gland in the male body. It's only about the size of a walnut, but it is absolutely essential for the continuation of our species. Yet for so many of us, what it actually does is kind of a black box. So today, let's open up the user's guide to the prostate.
So yeah, it's just this tiny gland, but its impact on fertility and on health as men get older is absolutely huge. So what is this thing's mission? What is it actually designed to do? Okay, so let's get our bearings here. What you're looking at are a few different views of the prostate itself, and you can see how it's kind of tucked right there just below the bladder. It might not look like much, but inside this small package, there is a whole world of incredible biological complexity going on.
All right, before we dive into all the really complex stuff, let's just start with the basics. What's its number one, most important job? What is the prostate for?
Okay, so at its very core, the prostate really has one primary mission: to act as a life support system for sperm. It cooks up and releases this very special fluid. It's like a cocktail of proteins and minerals that both nourishes and protects sperm on their journey. Simple as that. Without this stuff, fertility, just not possible.
What's really fascinating, though, is that the prostate isn't just one solid thing. You should think of it less as a single object and more like a city, with different zones or neighborhoods. And believe me, where you are in this city, well, it has huge implications for your health. So, here's the map of our little city. That outer region, that's the peripheral zone, or the PZ. Then you've got the central zone, CZ. And the one kind of wrapped right around the urethra, that's the transition zone, or TZ. And why does this geography matter so much? Well, because different problems, they tend to pop up in very specific neighborhoods.
And right here, this really makes the clinical side of things crystal clear. So that inner part, the transition zone, that's where BPH usually starts. The non-cancerous enlargement that affects so many men as they get older. But that outer ring, the peripheral zone, that's a different story. That's the neighborhood where most prostate cancers decide to set up shop.
And just to really hammer this point home, a whopping 70% of prostate cancers start right there in that outer region, the peripheral zone. So the takeaway here is pretty stark, right? When it comes to prostate health, in a lot of ways, your anatomy really is your destiny.
Okay, so we've seen the big picture, the city map. Now, let's zoom way in, down to the micro level. Because if the prostate is a city, then each neighborhood is packed with these tiny microscopic factories, and every single one is working around the clock to produce that vital prostatic fluid.
And here we are. This is one of those factories. Scientists call it a functional tissue unit. This right here, this is the engine room of the prostate. It's basically a tiny gland lined with super specialized cells, all held together by the surrounding tissue. And this is it. This is where every single drop of that fluid gets made.
So let's meet the crew. First up, the luminal cells. The science calls them the workhorse cells, and for good reason. These are your primary producers, the ones on the assembly line, constantly churning out and secreting all those complex proteins that make the prostatic fluid what it is.
And right underneath them, you've got the basal cells. Now, they're not on the production line themselves. Think of them more like the factory's foundation, the support structure. Their whole job is to maintain the building's integrity, making sure the whole operation stays solid, so the workhorses, the luminal cells, can do their job.
Okay, so we've got our factories. We've met the workers. But what exactly is on that assembly line? What are they making? Let's pop the hood and look at the secret formula of prostatic fluid. Because, wow, it is a brilliant piece of biochemical engineering.
First off, let's just get some perspective here. The prostate's contribution here is huge. We're talking about roughly 40% of the total volume of semen. The other 60% or so comes from the seminal vesicles. So yeah, it's a major partner in this whole reproductive collaboration.
Okay, now this is where it gets really cool. You see, semen has this two-stage mission, almost like a timed release capsule. First, stage 1. Coagulation. Right after ejaculation, the fluids all mix together and they form this gel that actually immobilizes the sperm for a little while. But then you wait 20, maybe 30 minutes, and boom, stage 2 kicks in. Enzymes from the prostate get to work, they dissolve that gel, and suddenly the sperm are free to start their journey. It's incredible.
But for this whole two-stage mission to work, there's one key ingredient. And its concentration inside the prostate is just mind-boggling. I mean, we're talking more than 100 times higher than what you'd find floating around in your blood plasma. 100 times! And that secret ingredient is zinc. And get this, the prostate has the highest concentration of zinc of any soft tissue in the entire human body, period. It's just an extraordinary biological fact. So you have to ask, right? Why so much zinc? Well, it's like a master regulator with a really clever two-part job. See, inside the prostate cells themselves, zinc messes with their metabolism. It kind of short-circuits their normal energy cycle. And that forces them to pump out massive amounts of this other substance called citrate. Then, once everything is, out, that citrate helps with the liquefaction part, dissolving the gel. And the zinc, it acts like a temporary parking brake on the sperm, keeping them dormant until they get to exactly where they need to be. Just brilliant.
So we've seen what the prostate is, what it does, but how does this thing even get built? Where does it come from? To figure that out, we've got to jump in a time machine and go way, way back to the earliest stages of development to see how the blueprint gets drawn up.
And this construction project happens incredibly fast. I mean, by about week 9 of gestation, the basic plumbing, the urogenital sinus, is already formed. Then, right at week 9, this critical process called instructive induction begins. By week 10, you see the very first solid buds of the prostate emerge from the urethra. And just a week later, they're already starting to elongate and branch out, forming that complex network we recognize in the adult gland. It's amazing.
And let's talk about that key process for a second, instructive induction. This is so cool. It means the surrounding tissue doesn't just permit the prostate to grow. It doesn't just say, okay, go ahead. No, it actively instructs the cells. It's like a foreman on a job site, fueled by hormones, pointing at these epithelial cells and telling them, your new job is to be a prostate cell. Get to work. Start building.
And this brings us to a really profound idea, something that goes way beyond just the prostate. It's this whole concept called the developmental origins of health and disease. And the basic idea is that what happens in these supercritical early windows of life, the things we're exposed to, can literally set the stage for our health or our diseases decades and decades later.
So we kind of end up right back where we started, looking at a simple blueprint. Because learning about the prostate, it's not just an anatomy lesson. It's a lesson in development, and it's a lesson in the long, long arc of our health. And it leaves you with this big question, right? If the blueprints for our adult health are drawn up in those very first moments of life, what does that mean for our future? It's a pretty fascinating and important thing to think about.